History is filled with wars that changed the world, but few conflicts reshaped an entire civilization like the Peloponnesian War. For nearly 30 years, two of the greatest powers of the ancient world fought for supremacy. On one side stood Athens, wealthy, democratic, and protected by the strongest navy in Greece. On the other stood Sparta, a military society whose disciplined soldiers were feared across the ancient world. It was more than a war between two cities. It became a struggle between two different ways of life. The conflict devastated Greece, destroyed economies, spread disease, divided allies, and ultimately ended the golden age of Athens. Many historians believe its consequences paved the way for the rise of Macedonia and, eventually, Alexander the Great. This is the story of the Peloponnesian War, a conflict recorded by one of history's greatest historians, Thucydides, who sought to explain not only what happened, but why it happened. To understand why Athens and Sparta fought, we must first go back several decades. In the early 5th century BCE, the Greek world faced an enormous threat. The mighty Persian Empire, ruled first by Darius I and later by Xerxes I, attempted to conquer the Greek city-states. Against overwhelming odds, a coalition of Greek forces resisted. The victories at Marathon, 490 BCE, Salamis, 480 BCE, and Plataea, 479 BCE, became defining moments in Greek history. Although many city-states contributed, two emerged as the dominant powers. Athens became famous for its navy. Sparta became renowned for its army. Together, they had defeated Persia. But peace would not last. Once the common enemy disappeared, rivalry slowly replaced cooperation. After the Persian Wars, many Greek cities feared another invasion. To strengthen their collective defense, Athens helped establish the Delian League around 478 BCE. The alliance was headquartered on the island of Delos. Member states contributed ships, soldiers, or money. Officially, the League existed to defend Greece from future Persian attacks. Over time, however, Athens became increasingly dominant. Instead of allowing allies to leave freely, Athens often insisted they remain in the alliance. Tribute collected from member states financed an expanding Athenian navy. Much of Athens' wealth flowed into ambitious construction projects. Among the most famous was the Parthenon, built atop the Acropolis during the leadership of Pericles. Athens entered what historians now call its Golden Age. Art flourished. Drama reached new heights through playwrights such as Sophocles, Euripides, and Aeschylus. Philosophers, sculptors, architects, and mathematicians transformed the city into one of the intellectual centers of the ancient world. To its citizens, Athens symbolized innovation and democracy. To many rivals, it increasingly looked like an empire. While Athens celebrated philosophy and naval power, Sparta followed a very different path. Located in the region of Laconia in the Peloponnese, Sparta was built around military discipline. Every aspect of Spartan society prepared citizens for war. Boys entered the agoge, a rigorous state-run training system, at around the age of 7. They learned endurance, discipline, survival, and combat. Luxury was discouraged. Personal sacrifice was expected. Sparta's government combined kingship, councils, and elected officials in a unique political system. Unlike Athens, Sparta did not pursue overseas empire through naval dominance. Instead, it relied on its formidable land army and leadership of the Peloponnesian League, an alliance of Greek city-states centered on mutual defense. For generations, Spartan hoplites were regarded as the finest infantry in Greece. Their reputation alone could discourage potential enemies. As Athens expanded its influence across the Aegean Sea, Sparta watched with growing concern. The balance of power that had existed after the Persian Wars was beginning to shift. Athens possessed unmatched naval strength. Its fleets controlled trade routes. Its treasury continued to grow. Sparta remained the dominant military power on land. Many smaller city-states found themselves caught between these two giants. Some supported Athens. Others relied on Sparta for protection. Competition gradually replaced trust. Historian Thucydides later argued that the deepest cause of the war was simple. Sparta feared the growing power of Athens. That fear, he wrote, made conflict increasingly unavoidable. Modern historians continue to debate the extent of this claim, but most agree that the rivalry had been building for decades. Although tension had existed for years, several disputes brought the rivals closer to war. One involved the city of Corcyra, modern Corfu. Corcyra possessed one of the largest navies in Greece and sought Athenian support during a conflict with Corinth, a key Spartan ally. Athens agreed to a defensive alliance. Corinth viewed this as direct interference. Another crisis centered on Potidaea, a city with ties to both Athens and Corinth. Disagreements over loyalty escalated into open conflict. At the same time, Athens imposed economic sanctions on the nearby city-state of Megara through what became known as the Megarian Decree. The sanctions restricted Megarian merchants from accessing markets within the Athenian Empire. Supporters viewed the decree as economic pressure. Critics regarded it as a serious provocation. Each dispute increased mistrust. Each diplomatic effort failed to restore lasting confidence. War now seemed increasingly likely. By 431 BCE, negotiations had broken down. Representatives from Sparta and its allies debated whether Athens had violated previous agreements. Many believed conflict could no longer be avoided. King Archidamus II of Sparta reportedly urged caution, warning that Athens possessed immense financial resources and naval power. Others argued immediate action was necessary before Athens became even stronger. Eventually, Sparta and its allies voted that Athens had broken the peace. Preparations for war accelerated. Across Greece, soldiers gathered. Shipyards became active. Allied states chose sides. Families prepared for uncertainty. Neither side expected a quick conflict. Few imagined the war would continue for nearly 3 decades. Fewer still realized it would transform the entire Greek world. In the spring of 431 BCE, the uneasy peace between Athens and Sparta finally collapsed. A Spartan-led force invaded Attica, the territory surrounding Athens. Their strategy was straightforward: destroy farms, burn crops, cut down olive groves, force the Athenians into a decisive land battle. For centuries, Sparta had relied on the superiority of its hoplite soldiers. If Athens fought in the open, Sparta believed victory would follow. But Athens had no intention of fighting on Spartan terms. Athens was led by the experienced statesman Pericles. He understood that Sparta's greatest strength was its army. Athens's greatest strength, however, was its navy. Instead of meeting the Spartans in open battle, Pericles ordered the rural population to move inside the city's massive defensive walls. Known as the Long Walls, these fortifications connected Athens to its port at Piraeus, allowing supplies to continue arriving by sea even while Spartan forces occupied the countryside. Meanwhile, the Athenian navy struck Spartan allies along the coast, raiding settlements and disrupting trade. It was a strategy of endurance. Pericles believed Sparta could devastate the countryside but could not starve a city that controlled the sea. For a time, his plan appeared effective. Then, disaster struck from within. In 430 BCE, while thousands of refugees crowded inside Athens' walls, a devastating epidemic spread through the city. Its exact cause remains uncertain. Modern scholars have proposed several possibilities, including typhoid fever, though no single explanation has been definitively proven. The disease spread rapidly through the overcrowded population. According to the historian Thucydides, who survived the outbreak himself, victims suffered intense fever, thirst, weakness, and exhaustion. Medical knowledge of the time offered little help. Families watched loved ones die. Doctors were among the first to succumb because they cared for the sick. Fear spread almost as quickly as the illness. Some Athenians abandoned traditional customs, others questioned their faith. The epidemic is estimated to have killed a significant portion of the city's population. Among the dead was Pericles, who died in 429 BCE. Athens had lost not only thousands of citizens, but also its most influential leader. The balance of the war began to shift. With Pericles gone, new political leaders emerged. Some favored cautious diplomacy. Others demanded aggressive military campaigns. Neither Athens nor Sparta could secure a decisive victory. Instead, the conflict expanded across the Greek world. Battles were fought on land and at sea. Allied cities changed sides. Civil conflicts erupted within several Greek states as supporters of Athens and Sparta competed for power. The war became increasingly complex. It was no longer a simple contest between two cities. It had become a struggle involving much of the Greek world. One of the most surprising moments of the war came in 425 BCE. On the island of Sphacteria, Athenian forces trapped a group of Spartan soldiers. For generations, Spartans had cultivated a reputation for never surrendering. Yet, after prolonged fighting and difficult conditions, more than 100 Spartan hoplites surrendered. The event stunned Greece. The image of Spartan invincibility had been challenged. Athens celebrated the victory. Sparta sought negotiations, but Athens believed it now held the advantage and chose to continue the war. In hindsight, many historians see this as one of several opportunities for an earlier peace that slipped away. As the conflict continued, two influential figures came to symbolize opposing approaches. The Spartan commander Brasidas launched bold campaigns in northern Greece, persuading several Athenian allies to defect. He combined military skill with diplomacy, earning respect even among some opponents. Athens responded under the leadership of the politician Cleon, who advocated continuing the war. In 422 BCE, the two men met during the Battle of Amphipolis. Both Brasidas and Cleon were killed. Their deaths removed two of the conflict's most prominent advocates for continued fighting and created an opportunity for renewed negotiations. In 421 BCE, representatives from Athens and Sparta signed what became known as the Peace of Nicias, named after the Athenian statesman Nicias. The agreement was intended to last 50 years. Prisoners were exchanged. Territories were to be returned. For the first time in a decade, Greece hoped the war might finally be over. But the peace proved fragile. Many allied city-states refused to accept all of its terms. Old rivalries remained unresolved. Skirmishes continued. Although large-scale fighting briefly declined, distrust never disappeared. The war had paused, but it had not truly ended. During this uneasy peace, a charismatic and controversial Athenian politician rose to prominence. His name was Alcibiades. Brilliant, ambitious, and persuasive, Alcibiades believed Athens could still achieve overwhelming victory. He promoted an ambitious plan to attack Sicily, particularly the powerful city of Syracuse. Supporters argued that controlling Sicily would strengthen Athens economically and strategically. Opponents, including Nicias, warned that the campaign was too risky and would stretch Athenian resources. The debate divided the city. Ultimately, the assembly approved one of the largest military expeditions in Athenian history. In 415 BCE, an enormous Athenian fleet sailed for Sicily. Hundreds of ships, thousands of soldiers and sailors. The expedition represented a tremendous investment of men, money, and confidence. Before the fleet even reached its destination, controversy erupted in Athens. Alcibiades was recalled to face charges connected to the mutilation of sacred statues. Rather than return for trial, he fled and eventually offered advice to Sparta. His defection deprived Athens of one of its most capable commanders. Meanwhile, the campaign in Sicily stalled. The defenders of Syracuse resisted fiercely. Spartan assistance strengthened the city's defenses. Months turned into years. Athens sent reinforcements, hoping to rescue the expedition. Instead, the situation deteriorated further. By 413 BCE, the campaign ended in catastrophe. Much of the Athenian fleet was destroyed or captured. Thousands of soldiers were killed or taken prisoner. Many captives were confined in harsh conditions within stone quarries outside Syracuse. The Sicilian Expedition became one of the greatest military disasters of the ancient world. It shattered Athens' resources, weakened morale, and transformed the course of the war. The destruction of the Sicilian Expedition marked a turning point. Athens had lost hundreds of ships, thousands of experienced sailors and soldiers, and many of its finest commanders. The defeat shocked the Greek world. For the first time, Sparta believed victory was within reach. But Athens refused to surrender. Despite enormous losses, the city rapidly built new warships, recruited fresh crews, and increased taxes to finance the war. Its resilience surprised even its enemies. Yet beneath this determination, cracks were beginning to appear. Money was running short. Allies were questioning Athenian leadership. Rebellions broke out across the empire. The long war was draining everyone involved. One of the greatest ironies of the war was about to unfold. Only decades earlier, Athens and Sparta had fought together against the mighty Persian Empire. Now Persia saw an opportunity. Rather than invading Greece again, Persian leaders chose a different strategy. They supported Sparta financially. Persian Prince Cyrus the Younger, acting on behalf of his father, King Darius II, provided resources that helped Sparta expand its navy. This changed the balance of power. For years, Athens had dominated the seas. Now Sparta could challenge that dominance with a fleet of its own. The war was no longer simply a Greek civil conflict. Foreign influence had become a decisive factor. The Spartan commander who would change the course of history was Lysander. Unlike many earlier Spartan leaders, Lysander recognized that defeating Athens required more than victories on land. It required destroying the Athenian fleet. Working closely with Persian supporters, he oversaw the construction and training of a powerful navy. He also built alliances with cities that had grown tired of Athenian rule. Many former allies welcomed Sparta as a liberator, believing it would grant greater independence. History would later show that reality was far more complicated. Nevertheless, Lysander steadily isolated Athens. Every captured port weakened the city's supply lines. Every rebellion reduced its income. Athens was slowly losing the empire that had taken decades to build. In 405 BCE, the two great fleets met near the Hellespont, at a place called Aegospotami. The Athenian navy established camp on an exposed shoreline. Lysander remained patient. For several days, the Athenians sailed out hoping to provoke a battle. Each time, Sparta refused. Then, according to ancient accounts, when many Athenian sailors had dispersed from their ships to gather supplies, Lysander struck. The Spartan fleet launched a sudden attack. The result was devastating. Most of the Athenian fleet was captured before it could organize an effective defense. Only a handful of ships escaped. The defeat destroyed Athens' naval power almost overnight. Without its fleet, the city could no longer protect its grain supply from the Black Sea. Its greatest military advantage had vanished. After Aegospotami, Sparta tightened its grip. Athens was surrounded by land and sea. Food became scarce, supplies dwindled. The once great city that had ruled the Aegean now struggled to feed its own population. Months passed. Starvation spread. The city's leaders faced an impossible decision: continue resisting and risk complete destruction, or surrender. In 404 BCE, Athens accepted Spartan terms. The Peloponnesian War was over. After nearly 3 decades of conflict, the greatest democracy in the Greek world had been defeated. The peace terms were severe. Athens surrendered most of its remaining fleet, retaining only a small number of ships. The famous Long Walls, symbols of Athenian power and security, were dismantled. Its overseas empire effectively came to an end. Sparta emerged as the dominant military power in Greece. For many Greeks, the war was finally over. But peace did not immediately bring stability. Years of destruction had left deep political, economic, and social divisions throughout the Greek world. Following Athens' defeat, Sparta supported the establishment of an oligarchic government known as the 30 Tyrants. Led in part by Critias, this regime ruled for only a short period but became notorious for political repression. Many citizens were exiled. Others were executed after accusations of opposing the new government. Property was confiscated. Fear spread throughout the city. Eventually, democratic supporters organized resistance. Within a year, democracy was restored to Athens. The episode demonstrated how fragile political systems could become after prolonged war. Much of what we know about the Peloponnesian War comes from Thucydides, an Athenian general turned historian. After being exiled following a military setback, he devoted himself to documenting the conflict. Unlike many earlier writers, Thucydides attempted to separate verified events from legend. He interviewed participants, compared accounts, analyzed political decisions, examined military strategy. He famously wrote that his work was intended to be a possession for all time, offering lessons for future generations rather than simply entertaining readers. Although historians continue to debate some details and speeches included in his history, his work remains one of the foundations of historical writing. The Peloponnesian War has often been simplified into a struggle between democracy and dictatorship. The reality was more complex. Athens championed democracy for its own citizens, but also maintained an empire over many allied states. Sparta valued military discipline and oligarchic government, yet it also relied on alliances and political compromise. Another common myth is that Sparta enjoyed lasting supremacy after its victory. In truth, Spartan dominance proved relatively brief. Other Greek powers, particularly Thebes, soon challenged Spartan authority. The war had weakened nearly every major city-state. No clear long-term winner emerged. Perhaps the greatest consequence of the Peloponnesian War was not who won, but who benefited later. Decades of warfare exhausted Greece, cities lost population, economies suffered. Political rivalries continued. As the Greek city-states competed against one another, a new power grew to the north. The Kingdom of Macedon, under Philip II, modernized its army and expanded its influence. Unable to unite effectively after years of conflict, the Greek city-states were eventually defeated by Philip at the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BCE. After Philip's assassination, his son Alexander the Great inherited a united Macedonian kingdom. Alexander would go on to conquer the Persian Empire and create one of history's largest empires. Many historians argue that such a rise would have been far more difficult had Greece not been weakened by the Peloponnesian War. The Peloponnesian War was more than a contest between Athens and Sparta. It was a struggle that transformed an entire civilization. It destroyed the golden age of Athens, it reshaped military strategy. It challenged political ideals. It inspired one of history's greatest historians to record the conflict with remarkable detail. Most importantly, it demonstrated a timeless lesson. Great powers are not defeated only by their enemies. They can also be weakened by prolonged conflict, internal divisions, and the inability to find lasting peace. Nearly 2,500 years later, the Peloponnesian War is still studied in military academies, universities, and diplomatic circles. Not simply because of its battles, but because its lessons about power, fear, ambition, and rivalry remain strikingly relevant. From the ashes of Athens and the victory of Sparta emerged a new chapter in history, one that would ultimately lead to the rise of Macedon, the conquest of Alexander the Great, and the spread of Greek culture across much of the known world. The Peloponnesian War did not merely end an era. It changed the course of history,